Hey everyone, Joey here, and the AYN Odin 2 is officially dead. Long live the king. AYN just this morning announced that the Odin 2 is officially discontinued, ending its long run of about 2.5 years or so since it was released. It will no longer be sold by AYN, but you could probably find it still through AliExpress and resellers and all of that sort of thing, but for all intents and purposes, the Odin 2 is officially dead. It is joining the Odin 2 Mini as being officially dead as well, unfortunately. So we have both Odin 2s dead. I don't know about the portal. I have the portal here. Doesn't say much in that listing or whatever note from an AYN. This is on sale for $249 for the base model, which is out of stock as of when I started filming this, but the Pro and Max are on sale as well. Well, not as good a deal as the base is, but for those who got the base at $249, it's a steal of a deal for the Odin 2 portal. But we're going to talk about the Odin 2 today. The Odin 2, in my opinion, was and is the most influential device of this hobby. And for you to understand that, we have to go back to 2023 when it was released, because that was a year that was very different than what we are seeing now in this year. 2023, coincidentally, was the year that I started my channel. It was also the year that Gamma started with Gamma OS. And the most powerful devices at that point were doing barely GameCube, barely PS2. Like Nintendo 64 had just become available thanks to the Anbernic RG405M. That was Anbernic's most powerful device at that point, was the 405M with the T618. You could do some Nintendo 64. You could try and get some GameCube and PS2 working, but you weren't doing much there. AYN had the Odin 1, which had significant problems with shipping and all other sorts of things, input lag, all of that. There was a lot of issues with the Odin 1, but it was also more powerful than the RG405M. That could do some GameCube, some Wii, some PS2, all that. But to understand where we're at when the Odin 2 actually released, none of GameCube, PS2 was ever on anybody's radar at that point. Then AYN is like, hey, we're going to be releasing a device for $299 with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and you can play whatever you want. It was a monumental moment at that point. We went from being able to just play a Nintendo 64 to skipping all of that to now we could just upscale GameCube, Wii, PS2. Switch was really good at that point still. And you have all of this available to you in a handheld that previously was not competing with any phones. We weren't doing anything like that. The Odin 2 was the monumental shift in the hobby to mount more powerful devices, custom driver support, all of these sorts of things that we never had to worry about before. We never cared or never were able to do any of that. We were using PAL ROMs to get GameCube and PS2 and all of that to be playable because we needed the extra 10, 5 FPS to get them to be playable. That is how starved we were for power. And so in the year that I launched my channel, there was 2 devices that really kind of pushed me into into content creators, into somebody's people followed. The RG405M from Anbernic, and the Odin 2 was the other one. The Odin 2 helped me a lot because I was one of the first reviewers to get it. Literally, I had one of the first videos out from what I remember and the first review out. It was crazy because, again, I had just started my channel that year. I was playing with all these kinds of handhelds that weren't doing that much. Then the Odin 2 comes and you're like, oh, I can just click 3X and play any GameCube, any PS2. I can go play Switch now. I can do whatever I want. Oh boy, that is a lot. And all of this for $299. It was insane. Now, the Odin 2 wasn't perfect. I look back at my review that I made back then, and I was a little, what is the word? A little too excited over things back then. But hindsight is 2020, right? The screen did not age well. I think that is out of everything on the Odin 2, that is the one thing that I can point to that is unfortunate. It's one of those things now where if you go and pick up an Odin 2, and let's say you have an Odin 2 portal or another device, you notice instantly that screen has massive ghosting. It's not that great. It's an IPS, but it's got a lot of issues. Whereas at the time, it just wasn't that scenario. We were in the moment, or we were before OLEDs ever releasing. The AYN Neo Pocket Air Mini had just released with the OLED, but It wasn't as powerful as the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and not a lot of people had it, so it wasn't really competing, despite the fact that it was more expensive than the Odin 2. But we just didn't have that, so IPS displays and all of that were what we had, and we were just comparing it to Switches, Switch 1 and Switch 1 OLED and all of that. And yeah, it was something that in hindsight, when I look at my review now, the display was not as good as I thought it to be. But at the time, it was something that like you weren't going to give up a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 just because of that display. There was no other device and would not be another device like that for a long time. Just to put that in perspective, this released October of 2023. That's when I got my review unit. It has taken 3 years now, I guess a little bit under 3 years, 2.5 years, for Retroid to catch up to a device that has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Anbernic still has not caught up, and AYN has been doing their thing. They've been having Snapdragon processors and all that sort of thing. But that just tells you, 2.5 years and we still have not seen competing devices from two of the other major manufacturers in this niche for how good the Odin 2 was at the time. And it wasn't even the fact that it was just power. That's what made the Odin 2 so crazy and why everybody literally bought one in the hobby. You had the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and that's awesome. You had 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM. Okay, great. Awesome options too. But then you had HDMI DisplayPort options, video out, which wasn't a normal thing back then. You had some devices that would do video out and all that. Some devices would not do it at all. Then you have some devices that will do video out but not charge at the same time. Here comes the Odin 2 and you can just dock it and do whatever you want with it. Things like that. There was an 8,000 milliamp hour battery. AYN didn't just go like, oh, I'm going to give you a 5,000 milliamp hour battery and then we'll upgrade you on the next one. They went full 8,000 milliamp hour battery and you had it all there. That was one of the things with this device, was that it had everything. It had the specs, it had the price, it had the power, all of it. And so, yeah, it kind of took the hobby by storm. And that's why I call it the most influential device. And that's why I think now, 2.5 years later, you would not have a Thor without the Odin 2. Like the Odin 2 spawned the Odin 2 Mini, the Odin 2 Portal, the Thor, the Odin 3. Without that, take AYN out of the equation right now, what devices would we be left with? We would have finally in 2026 a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 thanks to Retroid. And AYN would be doing their thing as well. AYN probably would have succeeded a lot more if AYN wasn't around. That's how crazy it is. If you remove AYN and their devices out of the equation for the last few years, everything looks kind of bleak in all honesty, really. So yeah, AYN, the Odin 2, it literally was the most influential in this hobby, in my opinion, for things that it did. And I don't mean like the Miu Mini and Miu Mini Plus were influential too. The RGB 20S from Pal Kitty was influential because it spawned R36 devices. You can argue that wasn't a good thing, but there are other influential devices in this hobby. But as far as power goes, as far as pushing this hobby forward into the fact that we are now mainstream, I saw IGN review the AYN Thor the other day. IGN reviewing a retro handheld. That's where we're at now, thanks to, and I'm going to say it, the Odin 2. That's what started it all. And just to go back to, again, the fact that they didn't cheap out on anything, the Odin 2 had 5 colors at release, 5 cool separate colors. There was like a black, a retro gray, a blue, a purple, and I can't remember, a white, I think was the last one. And then they added more on top of that. I bought a rainbow after my blue, like months later. And so they kept adding colors and things like that. Unheard of, really. Like if you look at devices that are releasing now in that price range, we don't get 7 colors to deal for, or 5, 6, 7 colors, different kinds of colors, like really cool colors. They continued that over the years. Like they still went with it. That's cool to me. I like that. I like the fact that they went hard on the Odin 2 and then they just kept continuing it since then on other devices. So yeah, I mean, this video doesn't have a structure to it. I had no notes for this. I had no script for this. I wanted to just sit down and just kind of reminisce about the Odin 2. It was, again, the year I started my channel. It was one of the devices that I think helped my channel. It was one of the devices that I remember loving at that point. It was something I used for a long time. And then I moved on to the Odin 2 Mini and I moved on to the Portal, which the Portal is a fantastic device. You don't get the Portal without the Odin 2. But yeah, I think the Odin 2 deserves a memoriam of some sort, a talking about it for what it did for the hobby and for what it did for everybody here. It allowed us to play a lot more games than we were playing before. And to me, that is the best thing that you can do in this hobby. It's why I love the Thor. It lets you play a lot more games that we just didn't have access to before in a good way. The Thor is great for 3DS and DS, yeah, but for me personally, it's great for walkthroughs on the bottom, the guides at the bottom. That changes how I've played my games for a big part of how I play my games. So yeah, I just want to do a quick video on the Odin 2. I think it deserves a lot. I think it's sad that it's discontinued, but obviously things get discontinued. It's always going to happen. Thankfully, it has spawned awesome devices, and it has helped this hobby reach the heights that we have reached now in 2026, which is being bored with every release because they're not as good as the previous releases. But I'm kidding. We are in a really good spot now. I don't think a lot of people know. If you're just joining this hobby now, you don't know the pains that we had to go through in the last 2.5 years to get here. But also, I don't think you were aware of how big of a jump we made in 2023, thanks to the Odin 2. So that's going to be it for this one. Just a very quick video. No notes, no script, just me talking into a camera and going to put some stuff on screen so you can not look at my face for, 12 minutes or whatever we're at. So hope you have a good one. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk all about retro handhelds. Support me through YouTube membership if you like my stuff. And hope you all have a good one.